At our divorce mediation, my husband's lawyer slid a financial disclosure across the table listing our marital assets at $91,000, and my husband looked at me with sad, patient eyes and said, "I want to be fair, Alina. I want you to be able to start over. Take half, I'm not going to fight you on it." His mother, sitting in against every rule, dabbed her eyes at her son's generosity, and I opened the folder I'd been building since our 3rd anniversary and said, "That's a beautiful speech, David. Now let's talk about the other $2 million. Let me back up. My name is Alina Morrow. I'm 42 years old, and my husband spent the final 3 years of our 18-year marriage secretly moving $2 million out of our reach so that he could divorce me with almost nothing, and his entire family knew and helped and cheered him on. What none of them knew was that I'd started keeping records long before any of them thought I was paying attention. Let me tell you about David, because you need to understand the particular kind of man who does this. David was a financial planner. That detail matters more than anything else in this story, so hold on to it. He managed money for a living. He understood trusts, accounts, transfers, valuations, every mechanism by which money can be moved and hidden and made to disappear on paper. He was very good at it. It was, in fact, the thing I'd admired about him when we were young, his competence, his command of a world I found opaque. I trusted him completely with our finances because he was an expert and he was my husband, and those two things together felt like a fortress. They were a fortress. I just didn't understand, for most of our marriage, who was inside it and who was locked out. We married when I was 24. I gave up my own career trajectory. I'd been in graphic design with real promise, because David's career took off and we decided together that I'd manage our home and later raise our 2 children while he built the income. It was a partnership. That's how it was described, and for a long time that's how it felt. I ran our entire domestic life and supported his career, and he earned and invested, and the wealth we built was ours, a joint project with a division of labor. Except David controlled all of it. Every account, every investment, every financial decision. I signed what he put in front of me. I didn't ask hard questions, because asking felt like distrust, and because he was the expert, and because for 14 years there was nothing to distrust. We were comfortable, then wealthy, and I assumed, the way you assume the floor will be there when you step, that the wealth was ours, equally safe. Here's when the floor started to move, though I didn't feel it for a long time. Around our 15th year, David changed. Subtly, he grew cooler, more distant, more critical of me in small ways. I thought it was a midlife thing, a rough patch, the ordinary weather of a long marriage. I tried harder. I went to counseling alone when he wouldn't come. I did not understand then that David had already made a decision, and that everything he did from that point was in service of it. He decided to leave. And being David, being a man who moved money for a living, he wasn't going to leave the ordinary way. He was going to engineer his exit so that he kept almost everything. Reason I ever found out is small and almost accidental, and it's the hinge of my whole life. On our 3rd anniversary, years earlier, long before any of this, David had set up online access to our accounts, and in a rare moment of partnership, had given me the logins, so you can see everything. We're a team. I almost never used them. He handled everything. But I'd kept them in an old email, forgotten. And around year 15, uneasy about David's coldness in a way I couldn't name, I logged in one night while he slept, just to look. Just to reassure myself that the fortress was still standing. And I noticed something. A transfer. A significant sum moved from an account I recognized to one I didn't. I didn't understand it. I wasn't a financial expert. But it sat wrong with me, the way Bianca's inflated invoice or Gerald's emails sat wrong with the women in every story like mine. Something was off. And instead of asking David, instinct, pure instinct, told me not to ask David, I did something that saved my life. I wrote it down. The date, the amount, the accounts, and I decided without fully admitting why that I would keep looking, quietly. For 3 years, I kept looking. I want to be clear about how hard and how strange this was. I was still married. I still loved him, or loved who I thought he was. I made his dinner and shared his bed and raised our children, and once or twice a month, when he was asleep or away, I logged into the accounts he thought I never checked, and I documented what I saw. And what I saw, slowly, over 3 years, was a systematic dismantling. David was moving our money, methodically. He was a professional, so he did it professionally. He moved funds into accounts held in the name of a limited liability company he controlled. He loaned large sums to his brother, Marcus, loans I suspected would quietly vanish and reappear after the divorce. He transferred assets into a trust, structured to look like it belonged to his parents. He undervalued his own business on paper, shifting its real worth into vehicles that wouldn't show up as marital property. He was, over 3 years, converting $2 million of our joint wealth into a maze that would, when the divorce came, leave the marital estate looking like almost nothing. And his family was in on it. That was the part that hurt beyond the money. The loans to Marcus, the trust in his parents' name, his family were the hiding places. They knew David was planning to leave me, knew he was hiding money to do it, and they participated, holding the assets, playing their roles. Because to them, I'd always been an outsider who'd married in, and family closes ranks. His mother, who'd smiled at my wedding, was a repository for hidden money designed to leave her grandchildren's mother with nothing. I documented all of it, 3 years. Every transfer, every loan, every trust filing I could find, screenshotted, dated, saved to an account and a drive David didn't know existed. I didn't understand all of it. I wasn't a financial planner. But I understood enough to know it was happening, and I was disciplined enough to record it, and I was patient enough to wait. And then, when I had 3 years of records, I did the smartest thing I did in this whole story. I took it to a professional before David ever knew I was awake. I found a divorce attorney, a formidable woman named Carol Whitfield who specialized in high-asset divorces, and specifically in hidden assets. And I brought her my 3 years of records, and I watched her face as she went through them, and I watched her go from politely interested to genuinely riveted. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "Alina, most women in your position come to me with a suspicion and no proof, and hidden asset cases are brutal to prove from scratch. You've brought me 3 years of contemporaneous documentation of what looks like systematic fraudulent transfer. Do you understand what you have here? You have him. He just doesn't know it yet." Carol brought in a forensic accountant, and with my 3 years of breadcrumbs as the map, the forensic accountant traced the whole maze, every transfer, every shell, every loan, the undervalued business, the trust. $2 million, hidden, documented, provable. My ANDA records had been the thread. The professional followed it all the way through the labyrinth. And then Carol told me to wait, to do nothing, to let David make his move first. "Men like this," she said, and I'd heard versions of this line from the lawyers in every story like mine, "are so certain they've been clever that they walk right into it. Let him file. Let him disclose his fake numbers. Let him put the lie on the record under oath. Then we spring it." So I waited, again, and David, right on schedule, made his move. He filed for divorce. And he came to me with the performance he'd clearly been rehearsing for years, the sad, reasonable, generous performance. He told me he'd been unhappy for a long time, that he wanted an amicable split, that he wanted to be fair. And his family activated around the narrative. Poor David, so generous even in heartbreak, offering his ungrateful wife half of their modest assets. His mother told relatives that David was being so good to Alina, more than she deserves. The story was set. David the generous, me the lucky recipient of his fairness. The mediation was where they planned to close it. David's lawyer would present the disclosure, $91,000 in marital assets. Visible crumbs left after 3 years of hiding. And David would generously offer half, and I, having no idea about the maze, would take $45,000 and a thank you, and start over with nothing while David walked away with $2 million nobody knew existed. His mother came to the mediation, technically against the rules, because she wanted to watch her son's triumph. I let her stay. I wanted her there. David's lawyer slid the disclosure across the table, $91,000. And David looked at me with those sad, patient, generous eyes and said, "I want to be fair, Alina. Take half. I'm not going to fight you on it." His mother dabbed her eyes, and I opened the folder. "That's a beautiful speech, David," I said. "Now let's talk about the other $2 million. I watched the sad, generous expression fall off my husband's face, and something else move in behind it, the fast calculation of a man who moves money for a living, suddenly wondering how much I knew. 3 years ago," I said, "I noticed a transfer I didn't understand, so I started keeping records. You gave me the account logins on our 3rd anniversary, David. So you can see everything, we're a team. I kept them. I've been watching for 3 years. I laid out the pages. The LLC you moved our funds into. The $200,000 you loaned Marcus 11 months ago. The trust you set up in your parents' names. The way you undervalued your own business by about 60% right before filing. I documented all of it as it happened with dates. And then I brought it to Carol, and Carol brought in a forensic accountant, and he followed every thread. $2 million, David, hidden. That's the real marital estate, not $91,000. David's lawyer had gone very still, the stillness of an attorney realizing his client lied to him. David's mother had stopped dabbing her eyes. "And here's the part you should really understand," Carol said, speaking for the first time, sliding a document of her own across the table. "Your client didn't just hide assets. He did it while filing sworn financial disclosures that we can now prove are false. That's not a divorce tactic. That's fraud on the court. Judges do not treat it as a negotiation. They treat it as a punishment. When we present this, the court won't just split the $2 million evenly. Courts routinely award the wronged spouse a disproportionate share when the other side has hidden assets and lied under oath. Your generosity, Mr. Morrow, is about to become very expensive." Here is how it ended, and it ended the way a hidden asset case ends when the wronged spouse walks in with 3 years of receipts. David's whole strategy collapsed because it had been built entirely on the assumption that I couldn't see. Once the hidden $2 million was documented and the false sworn disclosure was on the record, David had no leverage and enormous exposure. His lawyer, furious at having been made to file false documents, advised him to settle immediately and pray the judge didn't refer the fraud for further consequences. I did not take half. I took, on Carol's guidance and the court's clear inclination, considerably more than half, because when a spouse hides $2 million and lies under oath to steal it, the law stops being interested in fair to both sides and becomes very interested in making the liar pay. A disproportionate award, plus the return of the hidden assets, plus my legal and forensic costs, left David with a fraction of what he'd schemed to keep and left me and my children secure for life. The loans to Marcus were unwound. The trust in his parents' names was pierced, and the assets pulled back into the estate, which meant David's family, who had cheerfully held his hidden money and cheered his generosity, found themselves named in the findings, their participation documented. Relatives who'd been told what a good man David was being got to watch the $2 million surface in open court. The story of generous David and lucky Alina did not survive contact with the forensic report. David's mother never dabbed her eyes at me again. And David, the financial planner, the man whose entire professional identity was built on being trusted with other people's money, now had a court finding of fraudulent asset concealment attached to his name, in a profession that is licensed and regulated and deeply allergic to exactly that. His generosity performance cost him his money, and in the end, his standing, because word travels, and a financial advisor who defrauded his own wife, is not a financial advisor people rush to trust. My children are grown enough to have understood what happened, and they understood it clearly because I never had to badmouth their father. The court findings did that in his own numbers. That was Carol's final wisdom to me. Don't tell them what he did. Show them the record and let him have been the one who wrote it. I did. He was. I went back to design eventually. Not because I needed the money. I didn't anymore. But because I'd given it up at 24 for a partnership that turned out to be a fortress with me on the outside. And I wanted, at 42, to build something that was only mine. For 18 years, I trusted my husband with all of our money because he was the expert and I was the partner. He spent the last 3 of those years using that expertise to rob me, certain that the wife who'd signed whatever he put in front of her would never learn to read the fortress from the inside. He forgot he'd handed me the keys himself on our 3rd anniversary. So you can see everything. We're a team. I did see everything, David, for 3 years. I just waited until mediation to mention it.